All right, Kevin, what do you think about this? What are the major drivers of MLR?
Yeah, so I think we had talked about it, I think in the initial meeting. So like the major drivers are like the costs, like the medical costs that we pay out is one. That breaks down to like the unit cost.
I'm gonna scribe. Talking. Okay, so there's some notion of MLR, and there's some notion of medical costs.
Yep.
Okay. What else?
So I think medical costs like further break down into like the contracting component, like how much we negotiate, like fee schedules, and then also like who the numbers are actually seeing.
What do you mean by that? Negotiated costs and who they're seeing?
And who, like which providers that numbers are actually going to.
Okay, which providers?
So I guess that influences like which of the negotiate costs are actually realized because members are actually using those services.
Yep. Dushan, what do you think? Anything to add, change?
Overhead costs?
Right, so what do you mean by that?
That would factor into our MLR in terms of how much we're paying to run the whole operation.
Okay. What do you all think?
Like the demographic of our members, like do we have a large volume of really sick members?
Okay. Demographics. Where would you put that?
Probably over. You say where would I put it?
Yeah. I'm trying to get like a hierarchy here.
Probably under medical costs.
Okay. Under medical costs, something like this, demographics.
Yeah.
Maybe we were, I don't know, you were helpful to say like, to split up into like unit costs and utilization or something, and the demographics inflect utilization, and then we want to adjust for risk adjustment. We can also build it out this way.
Yeah. Kevin, what do you think? You okay with that? You want to do differently?
Yeah, I think that was it.
Okay. So what are those two things, Brennan?
So the demographics, the unit cost is like, I believe the cost we will reimburse for procedure as negotiated with specific providers, and then utilization would be like which providers people see and for what specific procedures. And the demographic.
These units are dollars per procedure. These units are number of procedures, more or less. Right, so you multiply those out. For those mathematically inclined, you just get dollars. Right? Okay. So where would you put us trying to prevent people from going to the ER? What's that?
Utilization.
Well, are they, let's say, maybe, I'm going to give a slightly different example. Where would you put, well, I guess, so, what if they go to the urgent care center and get the same treatment?
It costs less, so unit cost
Okay.
changes.
So if they don't go to the hospital, it's utilization. If they go to the urgent care center, it's unit cost?
Well, if they're going at all, like that's all we know, they're going, then it's utilization. If they're open to figuring out where they're going, then it is unit cost.
Yeah, and then so there's a bit of a grayscale, like not everything fits perfectly in one or the other. So we typically say these are the two big things, there's unit cost and utilization. There's certain things that kind of are in the middle, like, if you do your colonoscopy in the office, you don't actually really have a facility claim. So there's sort of less utilization, but kind of all you've done is switch it to a cheaper cost setting.
Yeah,
If people understand that.
It's kind of like a factor of both.
Kind of both. And so there are things that kind of sit in the middle between those two things. But when we break down medical costs, like that's, I think, a reasonably helpful breakdown of that thing. Okay, so, and what do you think, what is this notion of overhead? Can we talk about, like, so how does that fit into our MLR?
It's taking away from the premiums that were coming in. So like the pure revenue that we get, we have to subtract out what's taken away from that. So it's medical costs and then like us being.
So let's say, let's say we get, the second half of the year, we trim a lot of the excess cost in how we run. Let's say we make the concierge teams twice as productive or something like that. So we can handle twice as many and we, just need half as many reps for the number of members that we have, or provider services or something like that, right? How does that impact our MLR?
Should go up.
Our MLR goes up.
I mean, your overhead would go down. And then so,
Mm-hmm.
So your MLR goes down.
It depends on the time of year that you're talking about. You said at the end of the year.
Between now and then, the last 4 months, we shave $1 million off of our member service costs, let's say.
So then our MLR will improve because we're not having to take that $1 million out of our premium revenue.
So maybe give me. So all right. So we have this puzzle. So we have $1 million in member services get cut. My question is, what is the MLR impact? We then, I don't know if the video caught this. We said, how do I define MLR? MLR is medical cost divided by premium. Okay, great. So now I cut out $1 million from my overhead. What happens to the MLR?
I changed my answer. I think it doesn't change, but your profits go up. Yeah, so it doesn't factor into the MLR at all.
There are a couple of ways that we calculate MLR. One is where we take the costs out from the premium, and one is where we don't.
Mm-hmm. Well, it depends what cost. So mostly, I would say that's right. It doesn't impact it. There's the cost. Sometimes we include net premiums, which is after taxes, but it's a certain subset of costs that's not related to our member service costs. But mostly MLR. Neither one of those two things is impacted by overhead, right? The only way that overhead does come in, and you don't have to worry about this too much, but when we do pricing, the regulators want to make sure that we are at the very least somewhat not massively negatively profitable, and so we will price our book of business to be neutral. And so if we do expect to have high overhead, then we will have to price a little higher for that reason. But there's a lot of things we do on the finance side, and we're going to do with different companies and getting things off of the Oscar entity and whatever. So don't worry about that too much. But the biggest thing is it's not in MLR. Okay. So, but what is obviously is our premiums. So whatever we price for is over here, and that's just whatever we price for. Divided by that is boom, medical cost. Okay, so now this is where we're going to spend our time today. So then let's go to the second half, Kevin. I'm not letting you off the hook yet. What's the second half of that question, which is what are the things we should do as a company to control these things? Let's start with unit cost. What can we do with unit cost?
So I guess do a good job contracting, making sure that we can build relationships and get the best deals possible when it comes to fee schedules.
Okay. Anything else?
I think this kind of goes to the place of service, but making sure that you have kind of different low-cost options for your members. So like offering teledoc so that you can kind of drive revenue to that kind of more cheaper option for us.
Okay,
I
so
think I'm in the gray
something
area.
around options.
Yeah.
Which we can explore. Okay.
You asking just about unit cost?
Yeah, let's just talk about unit cost for time being.
Gain a bunch of market share, and then you go back to your partners and you negotiate those rates.
So something about market share. So let's talk about that actually for a second. So we'll expound upon that. Why do I get? So I think what you're saying is if I have a bigger market share in the market, I can drive a harder bargain. Why? So why do I get better unit costs if I'm bigger?
Because you're bringing in more money. Basically direct more traffic to certain, I guess, health systems.
Okay.
Doesn't our narrow
Understand
network
about
kind of
directing
already do
traffic.
that? Like not, obviously we'd like a narrow network and a larger market share.
So, what, so say more about that.
So our narrow network means that if you are contracted with Oscar, you will naturally see more members because we have less providers. Obviously, a greater market share and still a narrow network is better because then there are more members to less providers.
Yeah, and so let's say let's say, let's take United has their Liberty plan, which is their broad network plan here in New York. It has all the major hospital systems in it. It has New York Presbyterian, NYU, Sinai, which here in Manhattan, and more. So let's say we come in, and I guess I want to understand this notion of driving traffic, right? Because let's say we deliver the exact same network as United. We're not going to change traffic at all, right? Or mostly, I mean, we might do care out or whatever, but let's just say we're a plan that doesn't do any of that. We come in and we go to all these hospitals and we say, we would like the same rates as United Healthcare because we're going to drive the exact same traffic as United Healthcare. Do we get the same rates?
So you're not benefiting them in any way.
Uh-huh.
And the chances of us taking market share, we're not going to be able to redistribute it. So, and we're smaller, so there's no incentive for them to give us a better rate. Unless we can say we're bringing new members to the table, in which case then maybe they'll negotiate with us.
So at the very least, like there are people who get like seeming like United gets good unit costs. It's driven by something not just traffic, you know, not where I'm just going to drop the traffic, but also my size. So then I want to understand that. So okay, I'm not going to change their patterns. It's just how big I am. Why is that? Why do I get better unit costs? I'm just big.
An extreme example of when it wouldn't matter if they were at full capacity and they didn't have the ability to expand, like in their hospitals, they wouldn't actually necessarily want new members, but having a big insurer sign on to them raises the potential that they can come closer to their capacity limits, and probably they're making money on a marginal procedure, but they have fixed costs for that existing capacity. So that having bigger members probably drives up their capacity and they're making more money on other people.
So do you think it matter? Does it matter how full the hospital beds are?
Yeah.
Doesn't it depend on their payment model, like what their fee-for-service is for value and where they land on the spectrum?
Say more about that.
Meaning, like, a pure fee-for-service hospital system would care more about having hospital beds full all the time versus one that's penalized if they go over their inpatient admission rates, right? Or if they're, like, at big and readmissions rates.
Yeah, so let's talk about fee-for-service and value. Stuff there. So now, one thing I wanted to say is, what would happen? Why, if you're New York Presbyterian and you're negotiating with United, why not just charge them 500% of Medicare, or 1,000% of Medicare, 2,000% of Medicare? Seems like a good deal for you, right? Why not just do that?
Because they don't need you. I think it'd be different if you're like Memorial Sloan Kettering and they do stuff like that. But like Presbyterian and Sinai are similar enough network-wise for United.
Right. So I think what they're afraid of, and like so, well, I guess presumably though we could also do that to them, right? And so why is New York Presbyterian also afraid of us?
Because we're not United yet.
Right. So I mean, like, there's a material business risk that if you go out and drop out a network like Montefiore just did with Aetna, that could materially impact the bottom line. And then if you're United, like if you're New York Presbyterian and United takes you out of network for 3 months, like I mean, you might shut the doors. Like I mean, it's like bad news, right? Of course, if you're United and you don't have your Presbyterian in, they have to make sure that they don't drop out of network. It's sort of that fear factor where traffic would eventually could potentially really well be driven away from them. So I would say that's one big, I think that's the reason why size ultimately matters. However, there are certain circumstances wherein we could get very much the same unit costs as United, right? So why not say, all right, fine, why not say the following? I'm New York Presbyterian. I have this deal with United. Great, cool. But man, United's kind of chafing me here and like has a lot of power. Why don't I get out of this game and sign up a deal with Oscar? That sounds like a good idea. So what's wrong with that?
Just we're like 1-200 size and then the terms and numbers.
Yeah, but we just give them a cool pitch about our technology and we say we're going to grow really fast and whatever. So why wouldn't they want to do that?
I mean, if they're making a good margin on business from United, then matching that rate schedule with Oscar might not do them harm, right? Like they might not necessarily see a ton of increased revenue from getting Oscar members, but it wouldn't hurt, right? They'd still get more people through the door, and they'd be getting the same that they could get from United.
Right. So I think that my view is it kind of depends, and sometimes, sure, yeah, like would be my view if I was running the hospital is like, man, if I got like Blue Cross giving me 95% market share and can take me out of business at any minute, and I'm totally beholden to them, I would love to have another insurer in the market, and I'd be willing to give them the same rates. Now, Blue Cross made me do some non-competitive things and twist my arm and not let me or something like that, but which is a sort of underhanded thing that may happen. But mostly, I would say, sure, like good, sounds good, right? However, if I'm in New York and I already have like 5 insurers, do I want another one? Like, why do I need a 6th insurance company? I got 5, and yeah, United's big, but nobody like, okay, you know, maybe Point of Oscar is big enough falls out of it, but it's a huge pain in the ass to have a whole, to bring in another payer. I gotta sign all these contracts, reconcile the claims, credential the providers, do all this stuff. And so if I'm in the mood to have another insurance company, I'll do all that stuff. But it's a big pain in the neck if there's no real path left. And so, and the difference between having 1 and having 2 or 3 is a big deal because if there's really one player, they can almost take me out and there's not a lot of ability to switch everybody in, whereas United really in New York can't take out your Presbyterian out of that plan because everybody will just freak out and switch to Aetna like very fast. And so, like, what's the pitch then that Oscar has to that? It's like, well, we'll be the backup plan to the backup plan to the backup plan, not as compelling, right? So anyway, a lot of people say that. A lot of people say if you're big, I just want to unpack the notion. If you're big, you get better unit costs. Well, not always, right? It depends. And then now, so how do we? So it sounds like okay, fine, but like how in New York do we get decent unit costs? Or should we just close up shop in New York? How do we deal with that? Because it is like there are 4 or 5 insurance companies. We're number 5 or 6 or whatever. New York Presbyterian isn't very eager to have us in the game. They're not eager to give us the same contract as United. So what do we do?
Do we have financial incentives in place in that market? I don't know if there's a risk deal or not, but I think that could be.
Not really. So what do we do in New York?
Focus on the ways that we're different from the big 5.
Well, let's say more about that.
So United are one of the biggest health insurers, but they're also one of the most difficult to deal with, and they don't pay quickly. So as a provider, particularly an independent provider, if you come to me and say you're not going to have to wait 6 months to get a claim paid, I can pay you quickly.
Yeah. Okay.
So particularly for smaller providers, that's helpful because it matters to them.
Good. So we'll get back to that. I think that's a great notion. But what do we literally do? So we literally had that conversation here at Presbyterian. What was the outcome? What do we do in New York? What's our strategy here at Presbyterian?
Is you don't enter a contract that's not going to benefit good, and then also kind of willing to work with you or excited to work with us because we're good.
Yeah, so we just don't contract with your Presbyterian is our strategy. Your Presbyterian is SIA. Basically, we had them in network in like 2015 when they came out. They were in by Magna Care, we took them out. They're very expensive, etc. So okay, so what do we do in here? What is our network in here? That's Mount Sinai. Okay, so what's Mount Sinai doing? Why Mount Sinai?
They're definitely, I think, kind of a more innovative provider that sees that kind of the world is changing and is willing to do things differently.
Okay, so there's this notion of innovation, perhaps. What else is our pitch to Simon?
Do they have a Vista?
Is it that we're committing, at least in this area, just to them and not other providers? So we're sending all the traffic to them.
Right, so back here, it's a narrow network. They're getting more volume as a result. That's like, I mean, there's a lot of innovation and Buckle will be cool and whatever. 98% of the deal, 90-something percent of the deal,
How many people do
you
you
ask whatever, a big chunk of it is volume. That we will get, and so then, okay, so and why are they interested in that? Directing traffic to them?
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So do we promise exclusivity to our big partners in markets, like Mount Sinai? Like, will we tell them we won't contract with any of your key competitors
Yes.
in the net? We do. Okay.
Yes. So with that is very much in the Mount Sinai contract. And when we go against that, for example, when we add in Northwell into a particular product, we've got to go more or less pay them
Okay.
to get out of that for this certain products. At least give them better contracted rates. So anyway, so what, and then why is Mount Sinai want more traffic?
To distinguish themselves from Presbyterian.
And what do you mean distinguish?
Just, there are a few hospital systems that are just enormous here. So if we say that we're going to only have this exclusive relationship with you, then they're setting themselves apart from Presbyterian, like we're trying to do from Aetna or United.
Yeah. Well, so there's maybe a branding and that sort of thing. The biggest thing I think is the thing that Brendan's saying is if you got spare capacity in your beds, bring it in, like, right? And so that the way that it works is that if you build a broad network, you have no impact really on anything unless you do some care routing or something. Like you don't impact where care goes. You're just like a layer on the top. And whether it's our broad network or this person's broad network or that person's broad network, care is, other than the member engagement stuff, which we do, but generally, Aetna, United, whatever, people just go to the doctors that they go to. And if you're Sinai, you don't care if it's Aetna or United or whoever, like it's just all, like other than there will be slightly different contracts, different risk deals, whatever. But in terms of the number of people in your beds, it doesn't make a difference, by and large. Whereas, if you do a narrow network, it will change the complexion of where care happens in New York, right? So we are literally changing where people go to get their care, and that's what narrow networks do, is they literally shift people over, right? And so that's why, in a directing traffic sense, that narrow networks have the ability to negotiate very, very good unit costs. So now, let's say,
Can I ask one question?
Yeah.
Do a lot of providers care about reducing the profits of their main competitors too, or is that not something like, is part of, I imagine part of the attractiveness is profitable to them, but is also part of the attractiveness that it's reducing their competitors' profitability, or in your case, in your experience, do they not often think like that?
I haven't, I don't know. I mean, they're a competitive gang, mostly they're sort of collegiate, but like all the seniors know each other and hang out, whatever. But no, I don't know how, I'm not going to apply that really. Maybe they're thinking like, okay, then they'll be hurting and they won't be able to advertise or whatever, but mostly I think they're trying to run the institution that they're running. They're also sort of all nonprofits, and so there's a little bit of competition. They're kind of just trying to keep their thing alive and growing. So mostly it's and then this notion of capacity actually really does matter, because if you've got an asset where you're like, if you're MSK or whatever and you're all full, and mostly MSK is very full, like you're not not really that interested in cutting these deals because they're like, well, I got all these people here already. You know, why am I going to cut a narrow network deal to get more people here when I already have all the people here that I need? I'm just going to be undercutting the unit cost that my average person has. You know what I mean? So that like if there are a lot of their beds are filled with commercial 300-400% of Medicare type people, I'm not cutting the deal for 200% of Medicare to drive volume. Why would I do that? Right? And so that's one of the big things that we go to negotiations with is we try to understand the circumstances that people are in. Now, a lot of people, for example, even if their beds are full, maybe they want more commercial lives at 150 or 200% Medicare versus 70% at Medicaid or 100% Medicare. So there's an element of, okay, let me get in more commercial lives. That can be even if the beds are full. But generally, that notion of capacity and what is my average unit cost of all of the hospitals are thinking, what is the average unit cost I have at play in my hospitals? And relative to this contract I'm being offered, is this going to be up or down? And also, will this change my market share? Yeah, how will this impact those two numbers? Right? That all makes sense? And so by and large, that's I'd say the key to how we've thus far negotiated good unit costs. Now let's say Adrian, takes this class, stays here at Oscar for a few months, says, I got it, I'm going to start my own competitor, Adrian Health. Adrian Health Insurance. And he goes to Sinai and says, I'd like a contract. I'm starting this health company, I'm doing it, man. And I'm living the industry. Starting American Health. What unit cost do you think, Adrian? And I'm going to go and I'm going to give you the same narrow network deal that Oscar has. So, what unit cost does Neum and Sinai give Adrian Health Incorporated? Same as Oscar.
Would they give me less because I'm newer? So there's more risk associated. I guess there isn't risk associated because you have protections for that. So I can't see why they would give me a different deal if I could say I was bringing the same amount of members. Unless they're available.
I guess it depends on some of the things we talked about. Like they still have more capacity, despite having Oscar. Maybe they would give him the same deal if he could offer the same thing.
Yeah, well, and what is Neum and Sinai worried about when he sits in that room with Adrian? If he doesn't get a deal with Adrian.
Where's Adrian going next?
Right, is Adrian going to go shopping to somebody else, my competitor around the corner? And if so, will that take some of the market share that Oscar has gotten? So, insofar as, I don't know how believable your company is going to be, and I wish you all the best. But there's a certain degree of the pain in the ass factor of just signing a contract with Adrian, and if he's going to totally flame out, which is a big pain in the neck. But let's say we assume Adrian's a good, viable concern, has a good marketing effort, has a cool brand, whatever. Well, I think the big concern is, well, is Adrian going to go to NYU? Who's Adrian going to go to? And if he goes to NYU and signs a narrow network deal, and he's got a cool brand, I know his Oscar guys have a cool brand, but Adrian was Adrian. And what if he takes the market share and moves the people over there? Right, well, that's not so good. And imagine if NYU was able to give about the same unit cost that Mount Sinai was, right? Then it becomes a bidding war over Adrian. Right? And so in narrow networks, where there is a plausible competitive environment, you can have very small players, even the smallest of players, get more or less the same deal. I think that's very different than broad networks, and you're just getting my views. But whereas with United doesn't give, New York Presbyterian deal with United, and they only care if they have a backup to United, a few backups and it's whatever. If Adrian went to New York Presbyterian and said, I'm going to sell a broad network, I think New York Presbyterian would be like, I don't care, who cares? Why would I ever get out of my office, right? But Adrian goes and sells a narrow network. Well, then the person has to worry that they're going to go around the street, across the street, right? And And that's an interesting proposition, and that's one of the things that allows us to expand rapidly in individual markets, in narrow network markets. Because the individual market supports narrow networks. And narrow networks are inherently more negotiable, I think, for small players than broad networks. For just this reason that I'm saying, that the insurance company has some power to shop. Right? And if you have power to shop, you have to have you have to lower your price. That's the reason why on Amazon everything costs the same, mostly very similar. If you're buying a lot of it or a little bit, everybody gets the same price because there's competition. And if you can't really, there's a little bit of a bulk discount or whatever, but not nearly as much as there's in healthcare because they're shopping. Tech goes on, and if you don't play the shopping game, well, you ain't going to sell very many widgets on Amazon, right? And so the individual market is an interesting thing because it creates this notion of shopping for insurance companies to choose partners. And when there's plausible alternatives, everybody can more or less get much closer to the same rates. Yeah, and so that's why expanding nationally as an individual company is way easier. That's also why when we expand, we go start with individual and then later on small group because we need to get in the market, get some market share, be believable, and then be a plausible alternative to the other folks that are there. We can't be some fly-by-night Adrian Health stuff and pretend to negotiate a contract. Make sense? Questions? Okay, so that's, of all the things that we do, that's like unit cost 101. It's everything that we do. It also, to be clear, I'm talking about in the context of hospitals and health systems. That's about 75% of the decision. But it's the same thing for individual doctors. This notion of okay, if there's only one nephrology group in San Antonio, Texas, or neonatology is literally, I think, one group in San Antonio. They drive an incredibly hard bargain. They don't care who we are. Their beds are full. We have to pay them more than United to get there. We need a contract, please. Well, our beds are full. We got to pay more than United. Okay. Whereas primary care, well, there's tons of primary care, and nobody's telling me that. Well, driving that hard a bargain, right? And so, boom, there we go. So we're able to get very pick and choose our providers in that way. Yeah.
So you said narrow networks are intrinsically better for individual markets, and I'm wondering if we could dig into that. Is that because, again, an individual is localized, they can shop and choose plans based on whether our network meets their needs, whereas as you start going to businesses, they have to think about all of their employees as sort of a package, and they need to pick an insurance that can meet all their needs, and that makes it hard to be on a narrow network.
Yeah, that's the basic notion is that, and thank you for slowing it down. That as a business, even if we tried to get everybody, we all decided to work for Adrian Health Company. Imagine all the different doctors that we see. My spine person's at HSS, and yours is at this place and that place and whatever. And then Adrian, if he's trying to choose a plan for his people, has got to go and insure like everybody, or he's got to sit down and have a challenging conversation and say, listen, I know you can't see your doctor. And so that's benefit managers tend not to want to do that, and they're willing to pay some premium for that. And that's why broad networks, everybody knows they've got to be in broad network definitionally, so everybody can sign. I can charge more. Everybody, hey, we're more expensive, so everybody knows that it would be way painful to be pulled out, so they charge a lot more as a result. In their individual markets, you choose, we can all have different plans. You do whatever you want. And because of that, Mount Sinai knows that it has to compete and it has to give a better cost. Otherwise, it's going to get pulled out, and NYU's going to be in the place. By and large, that's what's going on. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So all this stuff around. So we talked about capacity. We talked about directing traffic. Obviously, contracting. There's also a notion of we just kind of have to play the game well. Which is another thing. It's you got to negotiate well, and there's a certain game of, the game theory that goes into this, and it's not transparent what rate I'm getting versus this person. So that's still a big part of it. We got to negotiate well, and make sure our analytics are good, and all those. Our contracting is good. Also, that we give ourselves sufficient time is another huge one, because the tighter the time frame, the more we'll take whatever deal you want. probably maybe have to do with Northwell because we're like down to the last wire and they're like holding out and we're like, all right, fine, just whatever you want, man. You got to sell the product. And so anyway, so running the contracting operation is another really important one, which we haven't always done well. We've had weird terms in our contracts that allow them to submit like a lab claim and a doctor's claim and a facility claim all for the same care. And we have to agree to that, that sort of stuff. So we have to be very, like, there's a ton of work that goes into actually, even once you get your general strategy right, you've got to run a really tight operation and stuff. Yeah, so that's a big component to what we do. So we're talking about that. I guess we're talking about market share. Options. We'll talk about that in a second. So now I want to talk about this innovation, which is what you said. No, you said difficult to deal with. And you said innovation. So does that how those things work?
Well, the claims processing one, at least in the new markets, we're hearing a lot of like pretty excited feedback on that. Like our standard is 5 days to reimburse, whereas the industry average is 15. So like that, especially for like the people in the office, that's really cool to say that we're doing that so differently. Like you have more time to do things you like to do instead of this like really painful insurance burden.
And so what do you mean you have more time?
So like our whole model and why we built the claim system in-house and why we have the provider portal is like it's less questions getting us exactly what we need. 95% of our claims now don't need to be touched by a human and then you get paid in 5 days. So like that really sets us apart. So especially in a smaller group where you can say maybe your administrative burden, you don't need 2 full-time employees, you might need 1 now. Like that does make, because insurance is difficult to deal with.
Yeah, and I think I want to separate a couple things. The speed with which people get paid is I think a relatively minor thing for most folks' business. It's nice to show, it's like cool that we're doing something, but whether they get like 10 days of working capital and the interest rate on that, 2% interest rate and 10 days, it's like sort of who cares. There's a little bit of value in that, but really not a lot of value. What matters much more, I think, for folks is all the things you're saying. How many office staff, how much of my physicians' lives is going down the drain in terms of getting authorizations, claims disputes, these sorts of things. And my aggregate view is we haven't done a lot on that. In fact, we're just getting up to industry standards, such as like you can submit like your prior authorizations online, like not everybody's been doing that, whatever. So I'd say to date, we're actually, now, there's an element of like United kind of sues you on stuff and there's a real pain in the neck to deal with. Like, so there's a certain level of difficult to deal with that we might be better because we're not like quite as aggressive as United or whatever. But from the basic operations, we haven't really yet differentiated ourselves. I can talk about this one whole class on what we're trying to do, but there's a lot of, I think, a good area where we can innovate, given that we're soon going to have our own in-house claim system, much more nimble, thoughtful, etc. So anyway, that's an interesting thing. The other thing you have to think about, though, is just as a business, how much of, like, I think you're limited more or less by the amount of money that you can save the other side in overhead. So, like, if I'm running a doctor's office and I have $10 million in claims or something like that, and my overhead is $500K or whatever, that's what I pay for my office staff and interest. The most you can do, you just cut that to 0, but obviously maybe you can cut it like some marginal amount or whatever. And so then what you're talking about is, okay, well, am I going to go, like, how much am I willing to pay? Well, maybe I'd be willing to take $9.8 million here for, so that I could cut this down to $300K. You know what I mean? So that this minus this is the same number, right? I'm netting 9.5 in either case. And so one of the things we have to explore is really how big is this and how much can we really influence it? And is it like 0.5% or is it like 5%? Because those are 2 totally different things. Like a 5% discount on your cost, okay, now we're in business. 0.5% on your cost is like a rounding. And like Julian isn't even that precise, like we wouldn't even know. And so and that's one of the things we're going to be working on at HCA with other folks is thinking about what are the actual literal things we can do and how much literally do they pay for. Yeah. And whereas, just to be clear, like, I mean, we're getting like a 30% decline in unit costs from building a narrow network and choosing the right partner. So choosing the right partner with Primera is like 30, 40, 50% unit costs. So that's like a huge deal. And then we're talking like a couple percent here. So just in the scheme of what we had to do in the evolution of the company, it was like getting this stuff right. There's probably like 30 to 40 points. One thing, like if I had to attribute it, it's like choosing the right person. Meaning, go with Sinai, not NYU, because Sinai is cheaper. That's like 20 points. Narrow network and directing volumes is probably like another 20 points percent in unit cost. Negotiating well is probably like 5 points. And then we'll see what we can get out of this. But if we get 2 to 3, that'll be pretty good. The other thing is if we can do this, the one thing that making life easier it gets you that isn't quite captured here is it might get you into broad networks faster. Because now I have a meaningful pitch to New York Presbyterian, where I'm no longer just like another random person that's not going to do anything different. I'm going to make your life easier. I'll give it to you for free, but I need the same unit cost as you. That's a niche, right? And so, whereas if you're narrow network, you're already working just with that person, right? You're already at the basement unit cost. Then you've got to prove that you can eliminate headcount, right? So anyway, when we think about difficult to deal with, I think it's much more useful in a broad network than it is in a big one. But we'll see. All of that's an experiment. Okay? What's our time? Oh, great. We got through 1/4 of the stuff I want to get through. Okay, that's unit costs. Questions on unit costs? I guess the final thing I'm going to say is this options thing I think is pretty relevant on both of these, which is particularly because we have the engagement that we do in care routing. If we can choose for you the best doctor, it's better to have a lot of options than to have only one option. Right? If we have one option, we're not really choosing, we're just saying, well, I'm going to go over there now.
Yeah.
But if we have 10 options, like, okay, there's, that's good, we can actually have some impact. And so particularly for Oscar, having network breadth actually has some economic value. And I think the difference, like a point or two of MLR, the meaningful stuff would be the difference between a narrow network and a broad network. Maybe a couple points given our care share. So there's some value in having more options if we can. But the more options you have, the more you don't choose, the more you don't choose particularly well, and the less you get a narrow network discount. So and these things swamp the having more options. Okay. So now let's talk about utilization in whatever time we have left. Who have I don't know, Megan, kick us off on utilization. What should we be thinking about in terms of controlling utilization?
The number of, how to control utilization.
Yeah.
So we have all the clinical review kind of operations that happen here. So requiring providers to get prior authorization before they do something. I think that's probably one of the biggest ones. And then there's also the member piece in kind of designing their product to give them certain financial incentives, or I guess give them some financial responsibility in the care that they receive. So, yeah, plans there.
Design. Anything else we should be thinking about?
How to handle the top segment, like our high-risk patients. I know Pop Health segments them out, so how do you deal with our pre-go flyers?
High risk. You might also call that something around like care management. All those things right now. Okay, so what else?
is it CRT who handle coordination for members who go to an out-of-network hospital, and then we try and move them into a different that handle through
Yeah,
CRT.
so that's discharge planning. And again, I would more call that unit cost, because if you are at an out-of-network facility and we're just moving you to an in-network one, you pay very high rates on the out-of-network to get you in. There's a certain degree where if we can like get you out of the hospital faster and into your home, you might call that a utilization because you'd have fewer bed days.
Yeah.
That's sort of a site of service type of issue. You know what I mean?
Just to throw something out there, maybe like, I don't know how much we care about preventative health type things.
So why are we here at Oscar? What are we doing here at Oscar with these group designs? Like, I presume that Aetna can do CRT, Aetna can do plan design. Aetna has high-risk members.
So it's like tools to help the member make the right choice.
Okay, so what does that mean?
So like how we all have 5 people on our care team to help us answer questions and like know where the best place to go is, and how like do we like geolocate where you are to find like an urgent care center with a low wait time. Like I think that's what they're not doing that we are doing, and that's like our biggest thing for utilization.
Yeah, so there's, the way I would put it, and again, we're not going to have tons of time, but there's relatively standard, well, let's see. There's all this stuff I would say on engagement. And engagement can help sometimes optimize unit costs, like go to this cheaper doctor or whatever, but the vast majority of it helps you on utilization, right? And within that, the way I organize in my brain is that there's care routing, which is sort of like reactive. Like somebody needs a doctor, okay, go to this one, right? There's proactive outreach. Which has a bunch of threads in it, but one is something like, hey, like, you've been calling us a lot and asking what our ER benefits are. Do you want to talk to somebody? Or, like, you've been into the emergency room 5 times in the last month. You want to talk to somebody or whatever. Or we saw that you had this very life important prescription and you just didn't fill it for the first time last month. Do you want to talk to somebody about filling your prescription? Right, and so there's simply just reactive and proactive as a few ways to think about this stuff. And then I think you can also think about, to a certain degree, delivering care ourselves. So if you think about telemedicine, just giving somebody an option that's really accessible, that is really, frankly, cheap for us, relative to what they would normally do, relative to urgent care or relative to whatever, is itself a way to lower, maybe sort of unit cost, but it's just cheaper for us to deal with pink eye than it is for somebody to wander around New York and try to deal with pink eye. Because they'll, at a minimum, go to an urgent care center, if not a primary care doctor, if not the emergency room, or who knows what. And so, and you can imagine the same being true if we did telespecialist or something like that. There's ways in which we can deliver care more cheaply than other people. And mostly, then, my view is sort of, you've got, like again, this is not perfectly formed, and I encourage everybody to develop their own frameworks. But you've got these things, and everything that we do is a lever for this. So plan design could be used in here, or here, or here to drive more engagement. So I'll pay you more if you go to, we'll waive your copay if you go to one of our doctors, or we'll pay you $1 towards your Amazon gift card every time you book an appointment using the care router. If you pick up our phone call or whatever, if you fill your meds, we'll pay you $50 or something like that. And so, similarly, there's a few other things like So plan design is one. You can imagine doing things like a second opinion network and saying, okay, I'm going to allow people who are about to get spine surgery to go to HSS and get a second opinion about whether they really need spine surgery. Cool idea, okay. Well, it's sort of like a proactive outreach sort of thing. So there's a bunch of ideas that one might have, like I'll create a virtual HMO, where people have to check in with me before they go to the doctor and help them find the right doctor. Well, that's sort of like a plan design, very big plan design thing, more or less around care. And so for me, these are the ways I think of it. Basically, just reactive, dealing with requests, proactive, saying, hey, would you do something else? And more or less just doing things more cheaply than other people that do it otherwise. And so anyway, I think those are thematically some of the big things, mostly over time. And again, a couple other things. Like, I think it's still important, obviously, to have things like CRT, which are basic like background operations called like sort of checks and balances on the doctors to say, hey, you can't do that weird surgery that's not medically necessary. You can't randomly just cut people. I think that's essential. It saves a couple of MLR points if we need that in the background. That's not one of these things, but it's more of a standard operation. Things like claims, payment, disputes, denials, like all those things are really important, hugely important, but they're not sort of our secret sauce. Everybody has a payment policy. Everybody will deny claims. Everybody will fight claims. Everybody has CRT, that sort of stuff. We need to do it at a world-class level. Doesn't mean we need to. That's how we're going to differentiate. And then similarly, to a certain extent, you can do all of these things more with different people in different ways. So if you think about high risk, of course I'm going to do more proactive outreach with people who are costing me more money because it's just a higher ROI. And when some traditional plans do that to a certain degree, is although sometimes they offer it to the health systems, but they have their own care management, says, please take your drugs, and please do this, and please do that, we'll keep you out of the hospital. And largely all that is proactive outreach in a sort of non-algorithmic, usually non-algorithmic way, targeted at a very, very, very small subset of the population. So when I think about how we can actually curb utilization, in addition to, like, this is a big part of it, and I guess, so, and these are the sub-levers. The other one I guess I didn't say is, which we talked about before, is just the network selection, the curation, where this all helps you get people to navigate your network well. Obviously, not having in bad doctors and bad hospitals to start is another big option. And so we talked about the network scorecard. How do we choose non-Sinai versus this? It's not just unit cost. It's also whether those providers help control utilization. So we got basically we choose networks. We do this engagement stuff. Blah, blah, blah. And then we do basically, so this is like 1, 2 is like the basics, CRT, claims, payments, blah, blah, blah. And 3 is engagement, and more or less those would be my 3 ways that we control medical expenses. Okay? Good, thank you all.